beautiful thought. So um, I'm prefacing by saying this is the beginning of a series of three, which may be expanded on in the future. I have a minhag, a custom once a year to take a topic, a halachic topic, and in lieu of a drasha in Shul on Shabbat, to teach about a half hour, 35 minute shiur, mini shiur on that topic. The three topics that we have done so far are Hadlakat Nerot, candle lighting, Kiddush, and Hamotzi on bread or challah. And Bert, you had a really nice comment, so please repeat that.
Okay, so generally speaking, when we learn about Shabbat, we learn about all the things we can't do. This is a good thing because we're going to be learning about all the things you can and have to do.
Right,
Then
and we
it's, in
do
other
that
words, they're no less,
beautiful.
they're not
The enhanced
losa says, which is
right there.
you can't do this, and the av malachas and the av and the via av malacha. This is
Avot
stuff that you
melacha,
should
they're
do.
called. Avot melacha in Hebrew.
Avot malacha, right?
Yeah, it's like Beit Cholim, Batei Cholim.
Right,
Or
right.
Bet Sefer is one school, Batei Sefer is many schools. So the same thing with the Av Melacha. So Melacha is the same word, which means what you're not allowed to, creative work. And Avot, Av Melacha is one, and Avot Melacha is many, which is interesting because you could have done Melachot because it's many different kinds, but that's not the way it works in Hebrew, at least not according to the Academia Lashon, the Grammar Academy in Israel, who are really a group of awesome people. I actually know one of them, and it's real. They're really awesome the way they work on the Hebrew language. Yes, Judy.
How did they come up with the term avot malacha?
So we don't have to get into that right now, but it's the Academia Lashon did not come into that, did not call it that. That's a very ancient term. I was just talking about turning it from singular into plural. I think it's like the mother of all, the father of all. It's a parent one, and Av Melacha is the parent category, and then there are toladot. Then there are, offspring of that are not allowed on Shabbat. So I want to go back to, let's preface it, all three of these shiurim by referring to something that Bert said, which has many, many hashlachot, many, how do you say that in English? I can't think of the word. What? Like, it's not spin-off, but yeah, there are many things that we learn from it. Can't think of the exact word right. Ramifications. Oh, there's Moshe. Thank you. So yeah, ramifications. Thank you. And let's start by reminding ourselves of when we read in the Torah about Shabbat. So it appears in two places. Who remembers what those two places are?
In Bereshit, where Hashem
Not
rested,
Bereshit.
when Hashem day,
1 second. What were you saying, Judy?
when Hashem rested on the seventh day, and that's Shabbat.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I appreciate that. Yes. But that's not about Shabbat. That's about Hashem resting. That's the reason for Shabbat. I was more referring to what Bert said, that when we received the 10 dibrot, Aseret dibrot, which is the 10 utterances, as Rabbi Sachs calls it, not commandments, because the word dibrot doesn't mean commandments. The 10 utterances from God. So we read about them once in Shemot, Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, when it happened. And then we read about it again in
Devarim,
in Deuteronomy, when Moshe is giving his final, very, very long parting words to Bnei Israel, and he repeats a lot of what happened. So what is always so interesting is that to look at the similarities and the differences between the Aseret HaDibrot that are written in Shemot when it happened, and what Moshe recounts in Devarim. And one of the main differences is that in one place it says Shamor, safeguard at Yom HaShabbat, lekadesho, to sanctify it. And the other one says Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, lekadesho, remember, safeguard and remember, lekadesho, in order to sanctify it. And this speaks to exactly what Bert was talking about, the way our sages interpreted that. Obviously they noticed that it said Shamor Zachor. And it's like the first question is Moshe. Where did you get off changing God's words? God said, was it Shamor, I think? I can't remember for right this second. Shamor and Shemot. Somebody could look that up. That would be great. And Zachor and Devarim. But whatever it is, Moshe, where
Zachor,
did you...
according to Gloria, is the first one.
Zachor is the first one?
That's what Gloria says. I
Oh,
take
well, if
that as
Gloria says it.
authoritative.
I definitely take it as authoritative. Anything pretty much that Gloria says, I agree. So Zachor is the first one, and then Shamor, the safeguard, is the second one. That's what I thought. So our sages say, well, obviously Moshe wasn't changing God's words. It could not be. It couldn't be that God said A, and Moshe is quoting God verbatim. Moshe changes it. Rather, who knows? What do we learn from this? We actually sing it on Shabbat in the Zmirot Shabbat. And I think we say it in the Chadodi. So we say in the Chadodi? Zachor v'shamor
Vishamar b'dibur echad. It's said at one
b'dibur
time.
echad. Yes. Zachor, the word Zachor at Yom Shabbat, remember Shabbat, v'shamor, and safeguard Shabbat, b'dibur echad. We're said at the same time by God. And one of the miracles is that Bnei Israel, the Israelites, were able to hear both of those words. When people speak to you, it's hard to hear both words. I go nuts. When two people speak to me at the same time, I can't hear either of them. They cancel it out and create a mishka bubble in my head, and I find it overwhelming. But even if somebody doesn't get overwhelmed, generally, in almost all cases, you can only hear one. It's very hard to assimilate. But one of the miracles was that they were able to hear both. But what our sages concluded from that was not only that they both happened, but that each one refers to a different aspect of Shabbat. A different aspect of Shabbat. One of them is the mitzvot lo ta'aseh, I don't like to call them negative, but I would say the refraining commandments. We refrain from creative work. Those are all the avot melacha. Those are all the things that we refrain from on Shabbat. The cooking, shearing, cutting, plowing, planting, lighting a flame, even carrying, unless we have a workaround for that, and all the different ones that we're familiar with. I mean, we're not usually farmers or sheep herders, but we're familiar with them. And then there are many, many that we're not allowed to do, the toladot, that they are the descendants of these avot melacha. So those are the lo taseh. So that's what Bert was saying. That's what we usually think of with Shabbat. But there's also the Zachor. How do we remember Shabbat and sanctify it by doing positive things? So I would love people here to chime in, and that's going to be the lead-in before we look at the source sheet. What do we do to beautify, to sanctify Shabbat, not in a refraining manner, but in a positive manner? Yes, Milton.
We light candles.
We light candles. Great. Good lead into the shiur. Perfect. Yes, it is. What else? Yes, Judy.
Kiddush,
We
Lakadsho.
make kiddush, right? What else? How do we make Shabbat special? Now, some of them are mitzvot.
We
I
also
get that.
We also eat 3
We eat
meals.
3 meals. Some of us eat 2, but we try to eat 3. Easier in the
I
summer.
understand, but
Yeah,
theoretically
that's the
3.
idea. Theoretically, right. But also we do other things. We delight in Shabbat. I'm going to put up the source sheet in a moment. We dress, usually we dress nicely. As a matter of fact, it was so interesting. I had a family over, and the boy who's in middle school, he was wearing, a t-shirt, a polo shirt, sorry, that he loved, which had whatever on it. And it was a polo shirt or a t-shirt. And we were talking about having special clothing for Shabbat. And he said, this is special clothing for me for Shabbat, because during the week, I have to wear the school uniform. So I don't get to wear the t-shirts that I like on Shabbat. So for me, this feels special, and he keeps it sparkling clean. I said, you know what? If that works for you, as long as you keep it special for Shabbat. We also might put a tablecloth. We might use special dishes on Shabbat. We make special foods sometimes on Shabbat. So there are other ways that we make Shabbat special. We have the candles, of course, and we have Shabbat meals that feel usually fancier and more special. Or at the very least that we're gathering, unless we're alone at home, we often gather with family, and we spend the time to eat together. Okay, that would be a good intro to frame these 3. Give me a moment, please. People see the source sheet?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great, excellent. Okay. Oh, is it big enough? I could make it a little bit bigger. Well, let me make it a teeny bit bigger if that'll make it easier. Is that a little better for people
Fine.
to see?
It's good.
A little bit bigger? Okay. All right. Let's start out. We spoke about the Shamor and the Zachor. This is a major source for two important aspects of Shabbat. Not exactly, this is more about how to parse the Zachor, the positive things that we do. And this is a source from Yeshayahu. Those who say a fuller Kiddush may recognize it because this is a Kiddush, I believe, in the Sephardic community, but some people, also not Sephardic, say it. They quote this pasuk. I'll say it in English, but of course you can read it in Hebrew as well. If you turn away your foot because of the Sabbath, meaning turn it away from the shuk, from the marketplace, from pursuing your business on my holy day, call Shabbat a delight. Now, a delight in English would be in Hebrew, oneg Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat. People familiar with oneg Shabbat?
Sure.
You've heard of it? What is oneg Shabbat for you? Anybody, chime in. Yeah. What would oneg Shabbat, delighting in Shabbat? Bert, you're muted if you wanted to say something. Anybody? Delighting in Shabbat, enjoying, pleasure, nothing?
It's a nice day, and you enjoy it. You go to school,
So,
you meet friends, you have people over.
okay, right? It's about
It's
spending
all
time with friends. And also, it's about special food. It's all the things we spoke about, special clothing, making your home look nice, cleaning it up, taking a shower for Shabbat. All of those things have to do, what do you do to delight in Shabbat? So we have a commandment to delight in Shabbat. But then the question is, our sages always asked, how do we put work clothes on this? You know what I mean when I say that? How do we turn that into something very specific? So that's one, Oneg Shabbat. Yes, Milton.
We invite a scholar in residence.
No, excellent. Yes, that is another way. Why? Because we have time. We have time to spend, and we can make the time. And actually, Milton and his wife were both there at the wonderful shiur given between Mincha and Ma'ariv by our intern, Susan Hornstein. So that was very nice to see you. Good, good. Oneg. And the whole, okay, so that's one. So, B'karata l'Shabbat oneg. Go on, Bert.
We also, youth groups generally have an Oneg Shabbos.
Yeah, you're right. That is a thing. Oneg Shabbat. It's nice because Oneg Shabbat has become a term used for, like an oneg, it's called in America. Even in Israel, I think it's called an oneg, where you invite people back after the meal and you sit around and you have fun food and maybe sing, maybe play a game. And that's part of delighting in Shabbat. Beautiful. And now you see where it comes from. It comes from this pasuk. It wasn't made up, that word. Likdosh Hashem mechubad, the holy of Lord, honorable. So here's a second part. We honor it. Kivod Shabbat. V'kibadito. How? Me'asot derachecha. By not doing what you do every day. Mimitzo chefzecha v'daber devar. Not pursuing your business nor speaking of everyday matters. So, do people know that there's actually, this is where we get a commandment that well, it's hard to say it's a commandment. It's more like a rabbinic principle that we should not talk about everyday matters. And it's actually a thing. What should we talk about at the Shabbat table? What should we talk about at the Shabbat table? Do we talk about finance? Do we go through a flow chart if you're in software like I was? You could, if it brings you pleasure. But one of the things we talked about when I was in Maharat was to be very careful not to speak. Let's say people like talking about politics, but let's say you have a couple of people at the table who don't like talking about it. Well, you're definitely not bringing them oneg Shabbat. And actually, I did that once at my Shabbat table. We had a disparate group of people. I don't remember how many, and everybody had to say two things that they're not interested in talking about. that doesn't interest them. Like one woman said, sports and politics. She has no interest in that. Somebody else, everybody had different things. So what we decided at that table, at that meal, we're not going to talk as a group about those topics. It was really interesting. And then as long as it was a topic that was okay with everyone, and we got into like such interesting conversation, but we felt that everybody was included. And I remember that woman came to me afterwards and said to me, I want to thank you because I so often come to meals and the talk turns to politics and sports, and I don't take part in either of those, and I always feel left out. So something to think of when you think about what you speak about at the Shabbat table and on Shabbat. Okay, so this is a source. Now I want to explain what the Vilna Gaon says. Remember, what are the two? Oneg Shabbat and Kavod Shabbat. So actually this I can also take off the Zoom for. So he explains like this as a gloss on Orach Chaim, on the Shulchan Aruch, on one of the Shulchan Aruchs. The Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. People familiar? Yeah, we're good? Okay, if somebody doesn't know, please let me know. He says like this.
Rabbi, we no longer can see the source sheets.
I know that. I said I can
At
take
least
off
I
the
can't
source
see it.
sheet. No, I said I don't.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I don't need the source sheet for this particular one because it's not, I didn't put this source on. When you're creating source sheets, you have to decide how much to put on. This is an explanation on the source sheet. The Vilna Gaon explains the difference between Kavod Shabbat and Oneg Shabbat, honoring the Shabbat and delighting in Shabbat. And he does it through the mitzvah. No, wait 1 second. Sorry, this is a preface, just a minute. The mitzvah of honoring Shabbat, lichavod Shabbat, refers to the preparations made for Shabbat before Shabbat. Everything that you do up until Shabbat. So what would that include? Cleaning your home, setting the table maybe, preparing food, washing clothing so you have fresh clothing. I don't know what else, getting flowers maybe. Anything you need to do before Shabbat to get ready for Shabbat, setting the lights, all of that. That would be honoring Shabbat. Does that make sense to people? To me, that made a lot of sense. You're showing, you know what it's like? You're going to have a scholar in residence, or you're going to have somebody important come to your home for a meal. You're going to respect them and honor them by cleaning up, by setting the table nicely. Everybody with me on that? So that's a way of showing respect.
Okay. One of the things that Rabbanit is that I think I've always thought it's interesting. We call it Yom Rishon Shabbos. In other words, every day, in other words, we're preparing as it were. We always say, well, how do we refer to the Sunday? We refer to Yom Rishon.
Oh, nice. Yes. The first day of the week, the second day of the week, until the sixth day, but on Shabbat, we don't say the seventh day. Yafeh. Beautiful. Right. It all leads up. Beautiful. Now, what the Vilna Gaon says is that Kavod Shabbat is preparing. Remember, we just said that. So it's up until lighting candles, actually. But what is Oneg Shabbat? Oneg Shabbat is the physical pleasure derived on Shabbat itself. The mitzvah of honoring Shabbat includes bathing, donning festive clothing, even shopping. The mitzvah of oneg on Shabbat includes, this is everything we said, I'm just putting it together just so you know, the Vilna Gaon agrees with us. The mitzvah of oneg includes eating Shabbat meals and any other enjoyable activities. Scholar in residence, going to a shiur, eating the meals, whatever. Okay, maybe cleaning up isn't considered oneg Shabbat, but it is part of what you have to do on Shabbat. After the meal. But Rav Tzadok HaKohen, who was a significant Jewish thinker and Hasidic leader in the 19th century, he died in 1900. This is how now you're going to see the connection. He says like this. When you enjoy the light of the Shabbat candles, that's Oneg Shabbat. But when you prepare the candles on Friday, that's Kavod Shabbat. Therefore, the mitzvah of lighting candles is a fulfillment of both Kavod Shabbat and Oneg Shabbat. Everybody with me on that? So we're going into this whole idea of lighting candles, that it fulfills two beautiful, beautiful, beautiful aspects of Shabbat. And remember, these are not the lo ta'aseh. These are still not the refraining. We're not there. We're in the zachor, the remembering part, which is the positive. Okay, so everybody with me. When we prepare the Shabbat candles, we're honoring Shabbat. When we appreciate and bathe in the light, bask in the light of Shabbat, of the Shabbat candles, that is a significant part of Oneg Shabbat. So remember when I said that the rabbis needed to put work clothes on this tenuous, amorphous Oneg Shabbat, Kavod Shabbat? So lighting candles was one way of doing it, because lighting candles is not a mitzvah from the Torah per se. Are people familiar with that? It is not a biblical mitzvah to light candles. What is a biblical mitzvah? Aseh, a positive commandment on Shabbat. Anybody?
Isn't Kiddush,
Kiddush.
theorizing?
Making Kiddush is biblical. Excellent. Okay, back to our source sheet. So now let's find out the source for lighting candles. This is the earliest, or one of the earliest sources. In Masechet Shabbat, is this big enough? Everybody can see, or should I make it bigger? Good, no, yes? Okay. If you need it bigger, let me know. Hadlakat ner b'Shabbat chova. Lighting candles on Shabbat is obligatory. What does Rashi say? Rashi is a gloss on the Gemara. It is part of the mitzvah of kavod Shabbat, honoring Shabbat, because an important meal can only be conducted in an illuminated place. Now we have to remember that when Rashi lived, there were no electric lights. But also people didn't waste their money on putting candles all the time. They didn't have the money for it, or they didn't need it. They often, as far as I know, I don't know if this was at the same time, if they were farmers or whatever they were doing, they generally got up with sunrise, they ate a meal, they went out to the field or whatever they were doing. Maybe they took some food with them. They came back before nightfall, they ate their second meal, and they more or less went to sleep. It was considered wasteful to light candles, but not on Shabbat. So Rashi is our source that this is honoring Shabbat, an early source. Tosafot, who were Rashi's grandchildren. This is because one is obligated to eat one's meal in a place where there is light because of the mitzvah of delighting in Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat. So again, we're seeing this interesting idea that hadlakat nerot, lighting candles, and I don't even think we have to say they're arguing with each other. I mean, they did live somewhat at the same time, but Tosfot lived later a little bit because they're grandchildren. But we see that Rashi and Tosfot touch on this idea that it is both kavod Shabbat, honoring Shabbat, and oneg Shabbat, delighting in the Shabbat. And actually, if you look through, I looked through many, many halachic sources, and they lived around, Rashi lived around the 10th century, I think, or 11th, and then Tosafot, a little bit later, grandchildren. But then we get to the Shulchan Aruch, who talks about it, Shmirat Shabbat Kehilchata. Everybody familiar with that? That was written in the previous century. Very important book about the first person who codified it, the Hilchot Shabbat, in modern day terms. Shmirat Shabbat Kehilchata, keeping Shabbat as it should be kept. The Pninei Halacha, a modern posek, all speak about Shabbat candles adding to fulfilling Kavod Shabbat and Oneg Shabbat. So it's interesting. Either you can be, like we said, Reb Tzadok Kohen, who says that the Kavod Shabbat is preparing it and the Oneg Shabbat is deriving pleasure on Shabbat, or you can look like Rashi and Tosafot and say, no. On Shabbat itself, you fulfill both Oneg and Kavod. But I don't think they're really in contention with each other. I think they all work. And maybe it's how you see it. They're all relating making a really solid connection between lighting candles and Kavod Shabbat and Oneg Shabbat. Okay, why is lighting Shabbat candles so important? And please feel free to interrupt or ask questions as we go along. So again, Masechet Shabbat, Tractate Shabbat, Rava said, it is obvious to me that, and you may be familiar with this, if one must choose between, Stephen actually mentioned it also in his Drashan Shabbat, he spoke about this briefly. If you only had enough money for either Shabbat candles or Chanukah candles, meaning Shabbat Chanukah, which one would you choose? You might think Hanukkah is more important because Hanukkah is a holiday and we have this mitzvah of lighting candles, but actually, that's not the one that's more important. What's more important is Shabbat. Why? Because Shabbat candle symbolizes Shalom Bayit, peace in the home. And he continues, if you had to choose between Shabbat candles and wine, and this is where it's a real chidush. I don't know if this is the way we paskin, but remember we said that making kiddush is biblical, while making bracha on the candles is rabbinic, but you can make kiddush on challah as well. So I assume what it means, if you only had challah and you didn't have enough money for both wine and the Shabbat lights, then better to make kiddush on challah than to make and make sure you have lights. Now it's maybe a little different today for some. Most people, thank God, have money for both, but or at least for the minimum. But we also have other lights today, so it's a little hard to know because we have electric lights. We have other ways to show Shalom Bayit. Although I would still say that candles add an ambiance that's very different from electric lights. So I'd love to hear what people think about how does that connect for you, the Shabbat candles and Shalom Bayit. If somebody has something to say about Shalom Bayit, connecting it, yeah.
It's like when you light the candles, it's like a different mood comes over you.
Nice.
It's that transition between
It is. I
world.
love that.
So for me, it's a very important moment.
I love that.
We wave our hands only on the Shabbat.
Like this, we gather. Yep.
Yeah.
Nachon.
And we want to bring peace into our home. And
Beautiful. Oh, that's nice to think of bringing peace. I think of family, but I love the idea that it brings peace. I love that. Oh, I'm going to adopt that if that's okay. I love that. So I also remember from growing up that my mother would be harried and rushed on Friday, and everything was. And the second she lit candles, she would turn around with a smile on her face and relax, and just felt like exactly what you said. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Carol. I appreciate it. Okay, so we now know that lighting candles is connected to 3 different ideas: to Kavod Shabbat, honoring the Shabbat; Oneg Shabbat, delighting in the Shabbat; and Shalom Bayit, creating an avira, a feeling, an environment of peace in the home. Look how much we've learned already about how important lighting candles are. Okay, now we're going to get into, all of that was a bit of an introduction, a preface about Shabbat candles. Why is it so important? Who is obligated to light? I think that most people think that women are obligated, and it's not always clear to people that men are obligated as well. So let's look at the Shulchan Aruch, who codified the Code of Jewish Law. Men and women, achad anashim v'achad anashim, both men and women are equally obligated in having lit candles in their home on Shabbat, meaning it's incumbent on the household. Is that clear? It is incumbent on the household. It's interesting. It doesn't say echad anashim v'echad anashim that men and women are obligated to light. What does it say? It's in a passive tense. They're obligated to have lit candles in their home on Shabbat. That is an obligation. So that's the basic halacha of Shabbat, to have lit candles. And then he continues to say women have a greater obligation in this regard than men, for they are normally at home and are involved in the household tasks. That would be the source, the reason. And I added a little footnote here, and therefore they're available to light at the right time. Because if the men, let's say, are coming home from work or from the fields, this is usual. Obviously today it's a little bit different, but we're looking at what it was in the 1500s when Rav Yosef Karo published it. And it made sense since women most often were connected to the home, raising children, doing the domestic tasks. Sometimes they ventured outside the home and had businesses, but it wasn't that common. So this became, I'm not saying it started here. I mean, it probably started before. But this is a way of looking at a halachic, very, very strong source, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Machaber, the person who wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And the Mishnah Berurah, who is a gloss on the Shulchan Aruch, said, and even if the husband wishes to light, the woman is preferred.
You
Any
know,
thoughts?
maybe
Yeah, Carol.
because that means she knows that everything is ready.
Oh, nice.
Thing is taken care of. And I'm wondering, is this parallel to like you have to educate your child or teach your child to swim? You don't have to teach them directly, but you have to make sure that they learn. You know, could your servant do it? My husband said, could your servant do it? Like,
Yeah, I think it's a little different. I don't think I mean, is it a Jewish person who would light the why wouldn't the people, one second. You're asking if a servant could light the candles.
Yeah, not say the blessing.
yeah, I mean, not necessarily say the blessing, but
Why would they light it? You mean if you're not able to? And what reason would there be?
You know.
I don't know. You're still getting ready, and the time is ticking.
You use the word household.
Household. This says household.
Oh, I guess I would say that if you were late, it happened to me once. I was in a car accident and I got home 30 seconds before Shabbat started. If I had gotten home 30 seconds later, I would not have been able to light candles. So I guess if I had somebody else who I could have called, I might have asked them to just light the candles for me. And maybe I would have just said the bracha on the candles when I got home. That might be what I would do. That would have been a workaround. Otherwise, I just don't see a reason to do it. I mean, why not do the mitzvah? It's beautiful. I mean, if you're not capable, if you're limited in your hand movements, that can happen as well. You physically, I broke my wrist once and there's no way I could strike a match because I'm a lefty and the right hand just didn't work as well. So that could be a reason. There's nothing wrong with lighting. And I guess if you couldn't physically say the bracha, that would be complicated. But if you lived by yourself and you couldn't speak, I guess you would just say it in your head. What are you going to do? Yeah, Bert.
When you say when you say the household, does that mean, I know that you do it when you're not in your house, as it were.
Wait, we're not up to
for
that.
example,
Let's
I know that
wait, Bert. Let's
we're
hold
not up to that. I'll be quiet then.
No, you don't have to be
Okay.
quiet. I'm just saying hold that thought because we're going to get to that. We're going to get to. So
fine.
what's your question about the household? Not in the household, not when you're traveling.
Oh yeah, what I was saying in the household, to me, you think of the household as the house, as opposed to other places that you said you were going to get to it later. So if you're, God forbid, in the hospital, or you're, in your dormitory.
Right. So we're going to get to that.
college.
Great questions,
fine.
and we're going to get to that. But I just think it's really beautiful that the Mishnah Berurah, there's a lot about equality. There's a lot, and clearly, if the husband, did light the candles, it would be fine. Your Yotze, there's no problem with it. But it's nice that there are a very few mitzvot, not many, that are particularly singled out by halacha. And it's preferable for women to do. So there may be women who rail against it. I'm not speaking for them. I think it's kind of beautiful that there are a few small mitzvot, and dafka, this one which is so associated with kavod Shabbat. Although you should know, Carol, it's interesting you said that about having everything ready. The Mishnah says that the husband has to walk through the home when he comes in and say, have you gotten the candles ready? Or have you taken maser from everything? Like he's coming and checking. Now, I guess that's okay. He's like doing the final checklist, and also because he usually has the 18 minutes afterwards, so he's able, I forgot to do X. I remember on Rosh Hashanah, when I gave my drasha, I started by saying that I lit candles. I turned around and I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot to water that plant. And I watched it slowly, droop, droop, droop over the next 2 days. Thank God I was able to rescue it. I mean, it didn't completely die, but I guess husband wasn't around or something and he couldn't water it for me. I don't know what the reason was, but usually there's the 18 minutes when he could do the melacha because he hasn't taken Shabbat on himself. So he could fill in, because sometimes, like you said, even if you know everything is on, oh my goodness, I forgot to turn this on, right? Like that can happen too. But I really like what you said, that the woman often has a handle, not always, but often has a handle on what's going on. Certainly there are many households where the husband is the one who does the cooking and the other things, and I'm not trying to say it differently, but this is a time-worn tradition that, and women are symbolizing that, and it's really beautiful, which is why we usually, women, take on ourselves whatever custom our mothers did, because it's handed down from woman to woman.
You know, I find it interesting that the Lubavitcher Rebbe made women lighting candles and girls lighting candles a big campaign.
Yeah. So
That's
first of all, it's something that a woman can do, right? They have this thing about tefillin. So women aren't going to put on tefillin as a rule, so that's not going to, I mean, you can, there's no problem with it. It's, you can say the bracha, but most women aren't going to do it. It's much too expensive and it's not often done. I mean, to do it like on a whim. But candles, one person. Now, the truth is, I think he does. I'm not sure. We used to light candles as girls, like to teach us, but only till we were bat mitzvah. And once we were bat mitzvah, then it would be a bracha levatala. So I'm not sure. It would be I'm not sure if he says to do it until age 12, because once you're part of the household, then whoever lights for the household, that person covers you. So you don't need to light a second set. So I'm not sure how he does it.
Yeah, I don't remember. Often it was reaching out to families that weren't so observant. So I don't know.
Right. So yeah, and maybe so again, I don't know the exact, but I agree that it's a beautiful idea and it's accessible. It's a very accessible mitzvah and beautiful. Okay. All right. The Mishnah Berurah actually adds something else. He adds that there's a teaching that Chava, Eve, initiated extinguishing the light in the world when she convinced Adam to eat from Eitzadat, from the tree of knowledge. So here is an opportunity to kindle light in the world. Every Shabbat we have that opportunity. But he also adds that the husband should have a part in it, what's called litaken et hanerot. Does anybody know what that is? I don't know if anybody here has that. My father used to do this for my mother, where he would light the candles and blow them out. That's called litaken et hanerot, or filling them with oil, paraffin oil, whatever you do. Because first of all, then he's taking a part in the mitzvah. But when you light them and blow them out, very often they're easier to light the second time. They light very quickly. So it just, you're not kind of fighting with the wick. Okay.
Did you hear that, Sean?
Don't want to start any arguments here, but it is a nice idea. Now, the way I did this is, I like to look at all the W questions: who, what, when, where, why. So the next question we have, the source 4 was who is obligated to light. Source 5 is how many candles does one light. Okay. So this is from Shmirat Shabbat. I try to take different sources, like Shmirat Shabbat, Kehilchata, which is a modern book from the previous century. It bases it on halachic background, but I'm showing you different sources from different times in our history. One fulfills the obligation by lighting one candle, so you fulfill it that way, but it is a beautification of the mitzvah to increase the number of candles, and the prevailing custom is to light no less than 2 candles. Remember how we started? Zachor and Shamor. Remember we talked about that. Zachor in Exodus and Shamor in Deuteronomy. So one is for Zachor, one is for remember, and one is for Shamor. One is to safeguard the Shabbat. And that, I think, is very common. When she is spending Shabbat outside the home, the custom is for her to light 2 candles only. So that's really interesting. So that goes a little bit, is touching on what Bert asked. What happens when you go to another home? Now, I thought for a long time that when I go to somebody's home, because I'm in their home for Shabbat, I don't have to light candles. But it turns out that's not true. It turns out I represent my household, and even when I go to somebody else, I carry my household with me, even if nobody's in my physical home. So I have a household because I'm separate and I'm independent. I'm married, but even when I wasn't married, so I'm a separate, independent person. So even when I go away, so why does it say only 2 candles? Because as we will learn, that some people add more than 2 candles, but when you go away, you just do the basics, which makes sense. It kind of feels like you're not going to overshadow your host. You're just going to do 2, a lot easier to carry 2 candlesticks, but it's an interesting idea. You only need to do the minimum, but when you're in your own home, then follow whatever custom you follow. So now let's see what Rabbi Eliezer Melamed says in Penene Halacha. Some women customarily light 1 candle for each member of the household. Others light 7 candles for 7 days of the week. Others light 10 candles for the 10 utterances, the Seret HaDibrot. And if a woman forgot to light candles, 1 week, it is customary for her to add an extra candle every week as a penalty. However, this only applies if there was no light at all, such as no electric lights in the home. And based on a comment by the Mishnah Berurah, the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata adds, it says only true if she truly forgot, not if she was prevented. Not if she was prevented, like me. But right that time, if I hadn't been able to light candles because I was in a car accident, I mean, I was okay. I had to recover, but I was okay. If I hadn't been able to because I was prevented, that's not the same thing as forgetting. What happened to my mother, that my father went to shul. She usually would fall asleep, I think, when he went to shul, sit down on the couch or in her bed. And he came home and he said, is everything okay? And she said, yeah, everything's fine. Why? Table was said, he said, there's no candles lit. And she somehow had fallen asleep and forgotten to light candles. So she added a candle from then on. Okay.
So there's a custom to add a candle for each child that you have?
There is a custom like that. Not everybody has it, but some people do.
So when you do that and then your child gets married and is lighting their own candle, do you reduce your candles
Hey,
again?
Carol, we spoke about this. You were there that Shabbat. We talked about it.
I don't remember.
Oh, you don't remember? Yeah. So in general, we do not reduce it because we never take away. It's just not a thing in Judaism. And there's still, if that's your custom, they're still your child.
Yeah, so that's what I've been doing.
You fulfill the mitzvah in either case, right? You only need 2 to fulfill the mitzvah, even 1, but 2 is our prevailing custom. But we did speak about it that there's no reason to take it off because they're still your children and they're under your umbrella.
Right. Okay, now I remember.
Even though I remember we spoke about it for a while. So that's your choice if you want to, but there's no reason not to. I certainly light for all my children. Some people light even for their daughters-in-law and sons-in-law. That's not my custom, so I haven't done that. But I think it's beautiful that some people do. It feels like a lot of candles.
My
Okay.
brain's big enough.
And as we said, generally we light 2 candles when we're away from home. Just so you know, students living away from home, like in a dorm, even though they may be supported, I guess even if they're totally supported by their parents, their main abode is away from their parents' home, and therefore they should light wherever they are as well, like in the dorm. Now, it might not be in their dorm room. We'll get to that. What do you do when it's unsafe? That's a separate question. But they should light where they are. The same thing with single people living on their own and away from their parents. They light because it's incumbent on their household. I mean, if they're single people living in the home with their parents, then they're part of that household. Everybody with me on this? We good? Okay. I just want to share that, just one second. All right, what I wanted to share is this comment by the Ramah that if they forget, one second, only if there was no light at all. Why is that? If there was electric light, even though she did not light the electric light in order to honor Shabbat, they wouldn't miss out on Oneg Shabbat, on delighting in the Shabbat, because there's light. They're not going to trip over each other. They're not doing things in the dark. They can see the food. That's why she doesn't have to add a candle. So here's the thing. Where does the custom come from to add a candle for each child that is born? Does anybody know? Anybody know where that came from? What the source is for that? No? Okay. Here's what it came from. Usually when a woman gave birth, the first Friday night after she gave birth was often either not home or not able to light candles. And for that one Shabbat, candles were lit by the husband. It says here the main concern was that women were too weak. I don't know if that was true. Now, In view of the improved health conditions that are prevalent nowadays, many poskim agree that the custom is no longer valid. They wouldn't actually allow women to light candles, which feels really odd. Women can light candles, but because the women missed a Shabbat of lighting candles, they often added a candle for their child. Now, that doesn't make sense in light of what we said, that only if she was forgot and not if she was prevented. But customs happen. So that was a custom that happened, and it's kind of a beautiful custom. So who wants to take that away? We don't really want to. Okay, remember what I said we do: who, what, why, all that. The next question we have is where. Where do you light the candles? The Rama explains, a gloss on the Shulchan Aruch, the main mitzvah are on the candles lit on or near the table rather than those lit in the rest of the home. Why? Because we want to eat our Shabbat meal in peace with Shalom Bayit, where we don't trip over each other, where we see the food that we're eating. Now, some people have the custom to light it on the table, but then it becomes muktzah. You can't move the table out. It's complicated. So, and I always feel that it's dangerous, but I know people who have done that. We light it near the Shabbat. You should be able to see it from the Shabbat table. It doesn't have to be right there, but you should be able to see it from the Shabbat table. The Mishnah Berurah actually says one should light candles in all the rooms where one will reside on Shabbat. You should have at least a light. Now, I buy the Shabbos lamps. People have that? People know the Shabbos lamps? They're really good. There are a few options. Very convenient. You also might have a light in your closet that you can, or in a bathroom in your bedroom. But people should have light so we don't trip over and hurt each other, hurt ourselves, and bump into things on Shabbat. Now, we asked where. Now we're asking when should they be lit? Just a minute. Okay. When do you light the candles? What's the earliest? So let's just read. The time for lighting candles is shortly before Shkia, halachic sunset, each place according to its custom. In Yerushalayim and also in Petach Tikva, they light 40 minutes before Shkia. Did people know that? Much, much, much earlier. But the general practice is 18 minutes. That was just set almost randomly. I don't know because it's Chai. I don't know why. But that's the general practice, except in Yerushalayim and in Petach Tikva. Did people know that? People with me? No. So there you go. In Yerushalayim, it's much earlier, and in Petach Tikva, it turns out. All right. If you can't make it in the 18 minutes before, then just do it during those 18 minutes as soon as you can. Try to make it at the 18-minute mark before Shkia. No, 1 second. Before sunset. Yeah, shortly before Shkia. So it is customary to do it at 18 minutes, exactly. Okay, Shkia, it means sunset. Now, remember in the summertime, sometimes because Shabbat starts so late, you might have kids or whatever, who want to eat early. If one wants to light candles early and accept Shabbat early, you may, but it can't be before what's called Plag Mincha, which is 1 1/4 halachic hours before nightfall. That's why we have certain times. You can't just accept Shabbat at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's actually a certain time. You don't need to remember. You can just look it up. However, it is preferable for the candles to last throughout the meal, because that's the main reason. So even if you accepted Shabbat early, but you don't end up eating till later, try to have candles that last long enough. Next, a priori, that means lechatchila, if you can, one should light Yom Tov candles close to sunset, just like Shabbat candles. However, there are those whose custom it is to light candles after returning from shul, before the meal. By the way, that is my custom. We leave like a yahrzeit candle on, and then when we come home from shul, we light the candles, which I love doing, and that feels very different from Shabbat. Why can we do that on Yom Tov but not on Shabbat? Not a trick question. Judy, you're speaking, but you're muted. Don't go off video. Just do the unmute.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bert.
Okay, because you can't do it after the 18 minutes on Shabbat, whereas you are allowed to, if you take one fire to the other, you're allowed to do that, on
Yom
Yom
Tov.
Tov.
Right, you can transfer.
You cannot do it that way.
Right,
You cannot do it that way on Shabbat.
You can't strike a match on Yom Tov, but you can transfer. Now, I want to ask you, how do you light candles? right? What's the way that we light candles? You said about it before, Carol. How do you do it?
I
You light the candles.
light the candles and then I wave my arms over it, but we don't do that on Yom Tov.
You do this. One second. Yeah. Then why do we cover our eyes?
So that when we open them, it appears new.
Right. And really, it's because usually what do you do whenever it's called mitzvah overet liasiyata, bracha, mitzvah overet liasiyata, I think. Bracha overet, mitzvah overet, I think it is. That you make a bracha, right? Like lighting Hanukkah candles. You make a bracha, you light the candles, right?
Right.
Lulav and etrog, you make a bracha, you light the candles. Shofar, you make a bracha, you blow the, lulav and etrog, you make a bracha and you wave them. Shofar, you make a bracha, you blow the shofar, right? All the mitzvot that we do, I guess tefillin, tzitzit, all of that, you make the bracha. Why can't you do that on Shabbat? Why can't we make the bracha on lighting candles and then light the candles? Yes, but Judy, you have to unmute.
You'd be over on the Shmirat Shabbat because you're not
Right,
supposed
because once you say the bracha, basically you've accepted Shabbat on yourself, and then you can't light. So we do kind of a trick, but it's a sweet trick, where we light the candles, we cover our eyes so that it seems like we don't see the light. We make the bracha, we open our eyes, and we see the light. Now, as Carol started saying, do we need to do this on Yom Tov? Do we have to cover our eyes? Do we have to light the candles, cover our eyes, say the bracha, ladlik ner shel Yom Tov? So David is shaking his head. So here's the thing. You can do it either way. Because some women, or men, I guess, got confused. Wait, on Shabbat I do it this way, Yom Tov, it's too confusing. So there's no problem with lighting, even on Yom Tov, there's no problem with lighting the candles, doing this, and opening your eyes and, saying the bracha. I don't do it that way. I say the bracha and light the candles specifically for that reason. But it's interesting that the halacha works both ways because there were some women who just got too confused by that. Wait, is it Shabbat I can do it? Is it Yom Tov? How to do it? No, I'm just going to do it the same way. So they're both okay, just so you know. Okay. We're getting to the end of our time. We're also getting to the end of the source sheet. So that's why we said some people light the candles like I'm off the show, like I do. How do we light? So this is something that we said. We put our hands in front of the candles after lighting them. Then we make the blessing. This is the customary of over la'asiyata, blessing before the action. Notes: while it is customary for women to accept Shabbat immediately upon candle lighting, men generally do not. And therefore, they could light in the usual way. But that's really confusing also. In exceptional circumstances, a woman may delay accepting Shabbat when lighting candles. With that, but you have to keep that in mind. Like if somebody is lighting a little early and getting a ride to shul, and you prefer not to get a ride to shul when you accept the Shabbat, you light the candle and you keep in mind, wait, I'm not accepting Shabbat till I get to shul. Does that make sense? On Yom Tov, one is allowed to light from an existing flame. This is what I just said. You can keep the practice of Shabbat to avoid confusion. You can do it the way Carol and David and I and other people do, say the bracha first, but you can do it either way. Can you use electric lights to light Shabbat candles? Okay, Rabbi Linzer has a great piece on this. When it comes to Shabbat candles, electric lights and LEDs are certainly permissible. If there are any safety concerns, such as leaving Shabbat candles unattended when invited out for pre-night dinner, one should use electric candles or just turn on the electric lights in their dining room. This is true in any situation where candles are unsafe or not permitted, such as in a hospital or a hotel or a dorm. In this case, one should turn off the electric light and turn it on specifically with the intention of turning it on for Shabbat. Some poskim decisors suggest that incandescent bulbs are better as they are closest to actual fire, and use of battery-operated bulbs are preferred to connecting to an electrical outlet where electricity is always present. And there is actually Machon
Are
Tzomet.
there really electric Shabbos candles? I was only familiar with
Here.
menorah.
So look. If you here, I can send the link. But there's Tzomet has something called Liner that fulfills the requirements properly. And I was thinking of acquiring one for myself so that when I go out, because I'm always going out to shul, so I'm leaving the candles. I'm not always so comfortable leaving them. If I don't eat at home, I don't like candles at home. I'm just not comfortable. So yes, Liner by Tzomet. Okay, last thing is what bracha do we make? Ladlik ner shel Shabbat, to light the candles of Shabbat, or Shabbat and Yom Tov, or just Yom Tov. But there's a very special one, Yom Kippurim, which we only say in Yom Kippur. But all the other Chagim, all the other holidays, we say Yom Tov. And there's a special prayer that women often, I say it. It's a very beautiful, beautiful prayer that we should, keep our family, ask for blessings, make me worthy to raise learned children and grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a beautiful song that you might know, Bizakeini legadel. I don't know if you know that song, but it comes from here.
Before I forget, could you please send me the source sheets, and I'll send it to the group,
100%.
everybody in the group.
Absolutely, I will send it to you. I can
Okay.
put it in the chat or send you by email.
No, send it to my email, then I can send.
Perfect.
I can just send it to everybody.
Great. Now, does anybody have any questions?
I'd love to hear the rest of that song of Zakeni.
Vizakeni, the Vav.
Okay.
Vizakeni. Wait, Moshe, you had a question?
Yeah, I remember learning that I thought it was for the Shabbat candles, but that the real mitzvah is for Havdalah that you have to light, and that the rabbi said if you do it when Shabbos leaves, you should definitely also have to do it when Shabbos starts.
That's interesting. I would have to look that up. I'm not familiar enough with it, but I'd be glad to look that up. I thought it was the opposite, actually, that you do
Maybe
Havdalah,
it
that
is.
you leave with light because you start with light.
Maybe that's what I learned too, but I knew
That's
it was
what I
one of those.
remembered. Okay, you could look that up. You could look it up and let me know too. But I thought no, you start with wine and ner, and so you end with wine and ner as well on Havdalah.
Because we do say Havdil ben Kodesh L'cho ben or L'choshe.
Yeah, so wait, what do you mean by that? Say more, Moshe.
No, just that at Havdalah you have to do it with light to show that.
Right, but I thought that was set up because we start with light, so we end with light. That's what I remembered.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's
No, don't be sorry. It's good to bring it up. I have no issue. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I remembered. So we could both look it up. Anybody else?
One more question.
Yes.
In case, say, you fell asleep and you didn't light the candles, would you be able to, look at the light, the electric light, and to cover your face and make the bracha that way?
I don't think so. Once it's Shabbat, I think if you
Yes.
actually forgot, you just, no, because remember what we said, if you do the electric lights, you need to turn them off and turn them on again specifically for Shabbat candles, as if you're lighting a candle.
I understand, but Bidi Eved, would it
No,
be
I don't think so.
okay?
I don't think you can fulfill the mitzvah that way. What?
The bracha is lahadlik ner.
Right, you're right.
I know what you're asking, Judy, but as far as I know, it's not like if you forgot, you forgot.
Right. Okay.
And remember what we said, even if you forgot, you don't have to add another candle unless it was completely dark in your home.
Right. Uh-huh.
Which is very rare. I don't know, unless you had a power outage, and then it wouldn't be your fault either.
Right.
Bizakeni legadel banim uvnei banim chachamim unevonim Ohavei Hashem yirei Elokim Anshei emet zera kodesh b'Hashem dvekim Umirim et ha'olam בתורה ובמעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא ומאירים את העולם בתורה ובמעשים טובים ובכל מלאכת עבודת הבורא.
Yashikoche.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Pleasure. All right, so we look forward to
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Looking
everybody.
forward to the next one when I'll let everybody know.
Thank you, Bert,
Thank
for
you.
organizing. Thanks for reaching out. This was a pleasure. And